Chosen one, you didn't just stumble across this moment. It was divinely set up for you. Something in your spirit has been stirring, searching, sensing there had to be more. And guess what? There is. You're not here by accident. You're here because heaven wanted to remind you who you are and whose you are. You've been through the fire, walked through the waiting, and prayed through the pressure. And still, here you are, still standing, still believing, still pushing, when you had every reason to quit. This is your confirmation. You didn't lose your mind. You didn't miss your moment. You're right on time for what God has already written with your name on it. The tests didn't take you out. They trained you. The pain didn't break you. It built you. And now you're stepping into the reason you were kept, covered, and called. So take a deep breath. Straighten your crown, because what's coming next wasn't just promised. It's been prepared for someone exactly like you. Let's go. Some people wonder how you kept going when no one seemed to notice, but heaven saw every moment. You've walked through situations that weren't loud or obvious, trials that didn't show up in public, but pulled at your soul in private. What you've endured wasn't measured in applause or approval, but in decisions only you and God knew about. Others might have assumed things were smooth because you carried it so well. They didn't see the mental weight. They didn't feel the emotional pressure. They didn't know how many times you showed up with grace while walking through inner storms. But heaven knew. Every moment you held your ground, every time you chose integrity over convenience, was counted and marked, looking for purpose and peace. Hit subscribe and start the journey. This test wasn't written, it was lived. Not in visible battles, but in hidden crossroads where shortcuts were offered, and you still chose the long road. There were moments when quitting looked easier than continuing, when what sounded like opportunity was actually temptation wearing a clever disguise. You didn't chase what glittered, you stood for what was true. While others ran toward instant results, you waited for what was real. You passed up the quick fix because you knew it would cost you your peace. That kind of endurance isn't ordinary. It's divine discipline. It's spiritual maturity forged in fire. The silence wasn't neglect, it was observation. You weren't forgotten. You were being watched from above with intentionality. You were being trusted with a test that couldn't be graded by human hands. God wasn't ignoring you. He was examining your consistency, your motive, your faith under pressure. You didn't just pass through hard seasons, you honored them. You didn't manipulate outcomes to get ahead. You stayed aligned when it seemed like it wasn't paying off. That's why now, the shift that's coming your way isn't coincidence, it's confirmation. When your heart is full of God's love, it's a sign to give. By tapping the super thank you button and offering $100 or more, you become a vessel of His grace. Your generosity can change lives, reaching hearts you may never meet. You have a divine purpose, and this act of faith carries His light forward. Give now, and may His blessings surround you always. You're entering a moment where the hidden things you passed are about to be revealed in visible favor. This is more than a breakthrough. It's a revealing of what's been built in secret. People may see the rise, but only heaven truly knows the road. You didn't get here through shortcuts. You arrived through surrender. And now, what's coming to you isn't just opportunity. It's trust, divine trust. Because you proved that your character could carry the very thing you were praying for. You didn't fold. You didn't bow to pressure. And because of that, what's opening now doesn't just look good, it fits your anointing. Where others tried to climb, you waited to be lifted. Where others hustled for position, You held your peace and guarded your posture. The promotion you're stepping into is built on the strength you developed in silence. It's not just elevation, it's entrustment. You're being given keys to something much bigger than doors. You're being handed territory, authority, access that wasn't earned by force, but by faithfulness. Every sleepless night, every private prayer, every time you chose obedience over ease, it's been preparing you. And now that preparation is meeting timing. This isn't a reward for perfection. It's a release based on posture. You didn't trade your integrity for attention. You didn't abandon your assignment when it was misunderstood. You kept walking with your eyes on truth and your heart open to correction. That's what made you ready. That's what makes you chosen. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. The very places you felt buried in are about to bloom with purpose. You're coming into a space that others tried to fake their way into. But heaven has reserved it for you because you walked in truth. The stage is changing, but the foundation remains. You are being lifted because you can carry what's sacred. You're being trusted with legacy, not just limelight. So don't downplay the process you've endured. Don't shrink when people finally notice. Stand firm. What felt like wilderness was training ground. What looked like a delay was divine protection. What seemed like silence was sacred shaping. And now, what rises through you carries weight, depth, and evidence of someone who didn't just pass a test. They became the proof. Heaven recorded it all. And now, it's time for others to see what faith, integrity, and alignment really build. Some carry a strength that never makes headlines, but heaven knows the cost of it. You've walked through tests no one clapped for, battles no one asked about, because they didn't know they were happening. Not because you were weak, but because the kind of trials you faced didn't come with warning signs or clear instructions. These weren't storms that shattered windows. They were slow pressures that tested your internal frame. And you stood, not with loud declarations or public validation, but with quiet commitment, with a kind of grit that chose integrity when convenience was easier, that chose stillness when retaliation would have felt right. It wasn't obvious, it wasn't glamorous, but it was real. This wasn't the kind of challenge you could prepare for with a checklist. It was the kind that required discernment at every turn, restraint when emotion screamed for a reaction, and conviction when compromise looked like relief. No one saw the inner tug of war. No one heard the thoughts you had to sort through to keep your peace. And yet you kept choosing what was right. Not because it was popular, not because it got praise, but because it was you. You held your ground not to be seen, but to stay true. You didn't lower your standards to survive the moment. You upheld your values, even when it cost you comfort, connection, or control. The truth is, this kind of testing is the kind that proves who someone is, not just what they believe. It's in those decisions no one ever thanks you for. The silent boundaries, the withheld responses, the forgiveness you gave without being asked, the patience you practiced when everything around you felt urgent. That's what God saw, and that's what He honored. You were steady in the storm, consistent in the silence, humble in the holding pattern. You weren't looking for applause. You were anchoring yourself in purpose. And now, the shift that's coming isn't just a blessing. It's a response to the way you chose obedience, when obedience felt invisible. A response to the way you chose alignment when shortcuts were dressed in opportunity. You didn't adjust your morals to match the moment. You stayed faithful. And because of that, you've been marked for more. Not just more influence, but more assignment. Not just recognition, but responsibility. You passed a test most won't even recognize because it never showed up in the spotlight. But God saw everything. That's why what's next for you can't be denied or explained by talent. It's not your charisma making room for you, it's your character. The rise is real, and it's rooted. No marketing, no manipulation, just the weight of quiet choices finally getting their moment of recognition. And when people ask how it happened, they'll never fully understand because they didn't see what it cost. But you'll know. You'll remember every no that preserved your yes. Every exit you took from what looked good but wasn't God. Every moment you protected your peace instead of proving a point. When your heart is full of God's love, it's a sign to give. By tapping the super thank you button and offering $100 or more, you become a vessel of His grace. Your generosity can change lives, reaching hearts you may never meet. You have a divine purpose, and this act of faith carries His light forward. Give now, and may His blessings surround you always. The elevation that's coming is specific. It's strategic. It's attached to someone who didn't take the easy route. Someone who stayed planted when the wind tried to pull them loose. Someone who held fast to who they were, even when no one was watching. This is the kind of foundation that doesn't crack under weight, because it was tested in the deep. That's why you're not just being lifted, you're being trusted. And what you carry now isn't a reward, it's a witness. A witness to what faithfulness looks like in the unseen. A witness to what heaven honors when no one else is paying attention. A witness to what kind of leader, healer, and restorer is born through fire, not fanfare. So hold your head high, not with pride, but with peace. You didn't just make it through, you stayed true. And in a world where shortcuts are celebrated, you chose the sacred road. That's what set you apart. That's why favor is finding you now. Not for who you pretended to be, but for who you stayed faithful to remain. Some people want favor without fire, access without alignment, but not you. You've been walking a road few would choose if they knew the cost. You've watched opportunities pass, not because you weren't capable, but because your calling demanded a different route. There were moments where quicker routes were right there in reach, routes that promised spotlight, recognition, applause. But every time you stood at the edge of decision, something deeper in your spirit whispered, "That's not your way." And instead of chasing what sparkled, you chose what sanctified. Not because it was easy, but because it was eternal. Step beyond the screen, join, and help light the way for others. This wasn't about making life harder, it was about keeping your life holy. You could have said yes to shortcuts cloaked in success. You could have built something fast, loud, and popular. But you knew deep down, what's rushed often rots, and what's fake eventually folds. So you didn't take the bait. You didn't trade your peace for platform. You didn't package your purpose just to please people. You stepped back when others stepped forward, not out of fear, but out of fear of God. You chose a pace that honored process, even when others passed you by. There were days when you questioned the delay. You wondered if silence meant you missed it. You asked God, "Did I make the right call?" But your soul always returned to the same conviction. Integrity is never wasted, it's invested. And every no you said to what wasn't for you became a seed in the spirit. Seeds that now are breaking the surface, one by one. You weren't behind. You were being built. Others saw pause. You were being planted. What you turned down in one season is what's about to be replaced in this next one. With something real, something that lasts, something that's been ordained. Because heaven never honors shortcuts, it honors surrender. You didn't need to scheme your way forward. You just needed to stay the course. And now, the same roads you could have compromised to enter, God is about to walk you into without compromise. People will be shocked at how you rise, but they won't understand what it took to stay low when everything in your flesh wanted to be seen. They'll witness favor, but they didn't witness the decisions you made in private. Decisions that protected your purity, preserved your clarity, and positioned you for something that wasn't man-made. This isn't manufactured elevation, it's mantled elevation. The reward isn't just the result, it's the revelation that it came from obedience. You weren't just disciplined, you were discerning. You didn't move for opportunity, you moved with assignment. You didn't need to be everywhere, because you were exactly where you were supposed to be. And because of that, what's about to find you doesn't come with strings. It comes with spiritual authority. You didn't water yourself down to fit in. You didn't shrink to appease what was broken. You didn't align with what was popular. You aligned with what was pure. And that's why you're being raised. Because you built what heaven could trust. You said no when yes was easier. You stood still when noise demanded movement. You followed peace, not performance. Now prepare yourself. The reward that's coming isn't shallow, it's sure. It doesn't need to be defended or explained. It's designed. Not just to bless you, but to reveal the kind of God you serve. The kind who doesn't forget sacrifice. The kind who keeps score in silence. The kind who lifts those who stayed low. Not because they couldn't rise, but because they refused to do it without him. This isn't a breakthrough built on branding. It's not a testimony built on talent. This is favor with foundation. This is access birthed in alignment. This is influence with integrity. You walked away from what glittered. And now God is about to show the world what it looks like when someone walks into what glows with glory. Nothing you missed was meant to be yours. Nothing you turned down was your last chance. Everything you refused made room for everything that's been reserved. You didn't forfeit the future, you protected it. And now, your yes to the hard road is about to echo in every space God walks you into. You didn't play the game, and now you're about to change the whole table. Some seasons didn't just test your patience, they tested your very identity. You found yourself standing in moments where nothing aligned, nothing explained itself, and nothing felt fair. It wasn't a season of answers, it was a season of empty space. The kind that made you question your path, your prayers, and even your place in the plan. You weren't facing loud opposition. You were dealing with quiet confusion. And yet, you remained. Not because you always felt strong, but because something deeper in you refused to let go of what you couldn't yet understand. That inner refusal to quit. That's what separated you. This wasn't a storm that shattered windows. It was a fog that blurred your direction. You weren't being told to stop, but you weren't being shown the next step either. There were no blueprints, no loud instructions, just silence, a divine quiet that left you staring at closed doors, wondering if maybe you'd knocked wrong. The familiar felt foreign. What used to feel like progress felt like pause. But instead of walking away, you stayed planted. And that decision meant everything. You didn't fake faith, you fought for it. You wrestled in the dark, not with unbelief, but with uncertainty. You kept moving forward even when the ground under you felt like it was shifting. Your prayers weren't always poetic. Sometimes they were groans, sometimes they were tears. But even in that rawness, you kept the line open. You weren't waiting for a perfect outcome. You were standing in the tension, anchored by a hope that couldn't be explained. That kind of faith doesn't come from head knowledge, it's formed in spiritual fire. The real test wasn't whether you could quote promises. It was whether you could keep walking when the promises felt distant. Could you still trust when time passed with no sign? Could you still worship when the path didn't make sense? Could you still show up with expectation when everything around you suggested disappointment? And the answer, over and over again, was yes. Maybe not loud, maybe not without tears, but yes, nonetheless. This wasn't about flawless obedience. It was about steady surrender. And that's what heaven noted. You didn't demand control. You learned to release it. You didn't rush clarity. You honored the mystery. And what that developed in you can't be taught. It can't be mimicked. It can't be borrowed. That kind of endurance builds a level of faith most only talk about, but few ever carry. When your heart is full of God's love, it's a sign to give. By tapping the super thank you button and offering $100 or more, you become a vessel of His grace. Your generosity can change lives, reaching hearts you may never meet. You have a divine purpose, and this act of faith carries His light forward. Give now, and may His blessings surround you always. And now, the very tension that tried to break you has become the foundation for your next level. The questions you held, the nights you stayed up wondering, the silence that made you second-guess yourself, all of it produced something sacred. Not just resilience, but revelation. Not just stability, but spiritual substance. You no longer need answers to believe. You believe because you've been carried by something greater than logic. That's why you're ready. That's why what's coming won't move you out of position. You've already been through the kind of test that shakes loose everything shallow. And now you're rooted, anchored, proven. You don't need everything to add up, because now your spirit recognizes the deeper arithmetic of heaven, where things are multiplied in the quiet, and value is measured by obedience, not outcome. What's ahead will begin to bring meaning to every moment that didn't make sense before. You'll understand why it had to be that unclear, why the doors didn't open when you knocked, why the wait was so long. Because this next chapter needed someone who wouldn't fold when the lights dimmed. Someone who didn't confuse God's silence with His absence. Someone who learned to move at the pace of purpose, not pressure. You passed, not because you had the right answers, but because you kept showing up, even when there were no answers at all. That's the kind of faith God rewards. Not performative, but personal. Not loud, but lasting. And what's coming is not just a blessing, it's a response. A divine response to every quiet moment you stayed loyal, every decision you made with no clarity, and every step you took based on trust alone. This is why your story is different. It's not built on what was seen. It's built on what was held in the dark. And now, heaven is turning the page, not to erase the pain, but to reveal the purpose behind it. You didn't just endure the season. You allowed it to shape you. And now, the shaping is complete. The reward is ready. And your faith? It's no longer tested, it's trusted. Some journeys require you to lose what you thought you needed, so you can gain what truly carries value. You've walked through chapters that felt like endings, connections fading, plans unraveling, moments slipping through your hands like sand. And in those seasons, it didn't feel like a test. It felt like rejection, like something good was being taken just when you started to believe. But even in the ache, something deeper was unfolding, a divine sifting. Not to punish you, but to position you. Not to leave you empty, but to make space for what your future would demand. Every goodbye you didn't expect, every door that stayed shut, every plan that unraveled without warning was a layer being peeled back. Not everything that left was meant to last. What walked away wasn't strong enough to walk forward with you. You weren't being abandoned, you were being aligned. The tears you cried over what left were seen, but so was the restraint you showed by not chasing what no longer carried your name. That, right there, was part of your preparation. Letting go when your heart wanted to hold on, trusting the pruning even when the fruit was still invisible. Some of what slipped away looked promising on the surface, but was heavy with compromise beneath. It shimmered, but lacked substance, and God, in His mercy, allowed the loss to protect your longevity. You didn't just lose for the sake of loss, you were being unburdened, so your next level wouldn't collapse under excess weight. You weren't stripped to stay empty, you were being made ready to hold more. And now, what's ahead won't just replace what left, it will restore what was missing in it all along. This isn't about bouncing back with a duplicate, it's about stepping forward into something designed, not duplicated. You won't just see return, you'll see redemption. Not only what was removed, but why it had to go. There's a kind of clarity coming that will heal even the memory of the pain. Because what's being handed to you in this new season won't come to test your faith, it'll come to honor it. What's being prepared has depth, it has weight, it has evidence of heaven's hand on it. You'll see it in the way doors open without striving. You'll feel it in the way peace flows where pressure used to live. This isn't a delayed blessing, it's a designed breakthrough, built from the blueprint of your obedience, measured by the sacrifices no one else understood. You endured the void, but you never let bitterness grow. You stood still in places where walking away would have been easier. You let go without needing all the answers. And that heart posture, that's what made you qualified. God doesn't bless pride, He lifts the surrendered. And you, in your surrender, passed a test that doesn't show up on paper but echoes in eternity. You're not walking into a recycled version of what you lost. You're walking into something tailored for who you became in the process, something layered with purpose, covered in peace, and built on the kind of faith that only fire can forge. You made it through not because you never stumbled, but because you refused to stay down. And now the tide turns.